Welcome into Esports Weekly, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, especially if you just watched on Patch Notes. I'm Ryan Bailey. I'll be your host as per usual. And this is going to be a great show because the week 2 of the SPL is going to be one that is right back into the action. We got a full schedule ahead for Thursday and Friday. So you got to make sure you get all your information up to the date on what all these teams are doing right after all these mid-season patches in the MSI and the way that meta's changed and all that kind of stuff. Lots of great information coming here for Esports Weekly. Of course, we'll also go over what happened in the SCL at SML and what you can expect from them moving forward as well. But I want to start with what I was just kind of talking about, and that's that we just got 2 SPL games last week. We only saw Space Station get stomped twice, frankly, and we didn't really get a chance to see how much has really changed from the mid-season patch. What are the biggest differences? What changes in the meta are we going to see? Everyone's starting to do that Renegade start. We're even seeing it in the SCL and the SML, where support starts at speed, so rotates over to red. Is that the best start in the current meta? Usually the way that these pro teams start is the biggest differentiator when it comes to Worlds. How do we start the map? How do we abuse the map in the early game? And that's something that Renegades did best at MSI, and it's a big reason why they won it. So what's going to be the next sort of adjustment? There were lots of god changes and lots of item changes during the mid-season patch, but no map changes. So that just leaves these pro teams to just kind of fester and figure out what is the best with everything that they've been practicing with so far. As for those god and item changes, what are we going to see from some of these pro teams? We only got to see 3 teams and what they value. It was Space Station twice and then Splice and Dignitas. But what about teams like E United? What about teams like Rival or SK? We feel like we haven't seen SK play in quite some time because they didn't make it to MSI. What have they been working on under the hood during their downtime since the midseason invitational? I think that's going to be the biggest thing. We saw the pinnacle of play during the midseason invitational. It was Renegades and the way that they played the map in the early game, but also the way that they picked this on her in the mid lane, all of these sort of different strategies. Their builds were a little bit different a lot of the time. How well can these teams kind of take a look at what Renegades did, apply it to their own team, and then end up looking and seeing to the future? How do we integrate Pridewind into all of our builds as frontliners? Because you probably should at this point. Is it worth playing Hunters to play Failnaught? What weird mages or non-mages or non-hunters can we play in the long lane since we're getting all this farm? A lot on the table still as we move forward into week 2 for the SPL. And let's take a look at that schedule, or excuse me, the standings from Phase 1 into Phase 2. Remember, these all carry over. So Obey Alliance, formerly Trifecta, went 1-8 a little bit earlier on in the phase. Still 1-8 coming into Phase 2, but with a new look. They won't be playing this week, but not until next week for them. I believe week 3 is when we will see that Obey Alliance debut. I talked a little bit about week 1 and what happened there. Quick recap for you if you missed our first week of Phase 2. It was a little bit of a rough one for SSG. And this is kind of the... I feel like SSG got dealt kind of a bad hand. I mean, they had a tough Phase 1. They come into Phase 2 having not made any other changes outside of moving Andy to mid. Sino got picked up, but that happened in Phase 1. And they got to play 2 of the best teams in the league in Splice and Team Dignitas. And don't get me wrong, Space Station Gaming did not pass that test. But they looked pretty good in Game 1 against Dignitas. Is that something that SSG fans can hold on to? I don't know. I think it's time for us to accept that Space Station Gaming will not be a, top 5 team by the time the Worlds comes around. But do they have the potential to get hot and play well at that LAN, qualify to the Worlds, and then make some noise there? Maybe. It's not all over for Space Station fans just yet. Just don't be expecting first seed is the way that I would look at it. But you can expect some top 5 plays from some of your members. That's right, Barracuda is going to be on our top 5 plays this week, but not starting with him. In fact, we're going to go to the minor league to start with. Number 5, Genetics, has been playing well for a long time for Simplicity. They came to MSI and you got a chance to see them. But I loved this play right here. He gets kind of all in committed on. Don't crack in a Fafnir when his ultimate is up. That's a little bit of a tip for you guys. Immunes all of that damage coming from the Poseidon Kraken, and then a beautiful stun over the wall. Threads the needle for the second stun and gets the kill himself onto Angry. Impressive stuff there from Genetics. We come to expect that kind of stuff from him at this point, but that play definitely caught my eye. Number 4, we've got Dobson in the SCL. Had a nice play. He's back on Dabo's Disciples, and among his disciples, he has once again returned to being a true god. Finds a solo kill on the Tiger, knocks him back into his ultimate, and then gives the Ao Kuang a little bit of the 1-2 right here off the ricochet. Beautiful double kill for Dobson in the SCL this week. Number 3 is what I was talking about a little bit earlier on. Barracuda had a nice play on the Morrigan. No traditional hunters for Barra this week, it felt like. But this play nearly saved the game up against Dig. This was game 1. His patience, and then finds the double stun onto both Whirlwind and Ataraxia. The quick transform, he's looking all over the place, and he can't find either of the carries. They just got double killed off that transform. Nicely done there by the traditional hunter player, but in this sense, the mage player, I suppose. Number 2, Sino also gives us a little bit of a play here. He's been preaching the Golden Blade Arachne for quite some time, but I didn't think it was capable of this. Dignitas trying to get a Fire Giant going in their favor. Sino lands down, gets the 2-for-1 Whirlwind, and the Fire Giant, thank you very much. The only Golden Blade steal a Fire Giant I have seen. Certainly a pro level play, an impressive performance there from Sino on the Arachne. And then number 1, if you didn't watch on Tuesday, just yesterday, the SML, you missed Penitom going off on the set. I mean, this man did things that we really haven't seen. Not 1 multi-kill, not 2 multi-kills, but 3 multi-kills. And you might be saying, oh, a couple double kills. No. 1 triple kill, 2 quadra kills, including this one very early on. This game, not close at this point, I would say, but Penitom finds the quadra kill for himself, and that one leading to the full deicide, of course. This one a little bit later on. Hey, Set is pretty good, but he is real hard. If you're Penitom, you're not really worried about that hard part right after the fact. This one is a legitimate 1v4, basically, as he goes in and gets them all with that Kingslayer ultimate. Love watching Set play. One of my favorite characters to watch in the entire game right now. That was his 2nd quadra kill all in the same game. And then if that wasn't enough, he got a triple later on, which could have been another quadra, by the way. Penitom on pop-off alert, to say the least, up against Team Exilium earlier on this week. Make sure you're tuning in on Tuesdays, man, especially when Sanguine's playing. They are a lot of fun to watch, without a doubt whatsoever. As I mentioned, we've got a big show for you here today, a full schedule of SPL games that you got to make sure you're ready and tuned in for. So we'll be right back as we get prepared to break down this week's SPL. Welcome back to Esports Weekly, everybody. We're going to kick off our talk for this week's big SPL schedule with E United, a team that made it to the midseason invitational but didn't exactly meet their mark when it comes to their performance on LAN. We got a chance to talk with Anatoly right now, of course, the correspondent for E United. Toly, how is this team feeling? Because I think that a lot of people would say that they overperformed in Phase 1. I think a lot of other people would say they underperformed in Phase 1. I think the general sentiment is we don't really know how good this team is yet.
I feel the cards weren't dealt in their favor, unfortunately, because they ended the split very well. They actually beat out Renegades in the regular split, but the problem was who they faced during MSI. It was Splice. They lost to Splice in the regular season at 0-3, and they couldn't find the victory at MSI, getting knocked out in that first round. They ended at 6-3 during the regulars Phase 1, so I think that was a good showing for them, even transitioning from Vedium into Emilito. A little bit of struggle to start off, but ended really hot with that Renegades win. Also, the second team rather to defeat Dignitas at the very end of it.
That's true. A lot of impressive wins on the resume for United, but then they have these moments where they just kind of look a little bit lost at
Sure.
times in some of these sets. How are they feeling as they prepare for Phase 2?
Well, they definitely felt that they were a top 2 team going into MSI, so they are a little disappointed at how they ended the first phase, but they have a lot of high hopes and preparations of like unique strategies going into the Phase 2. So they're feeling very confident despite that first round knockout from Splice. You can't be too mad to losing to Splice the way they were performing overall, despite losing to Renegades. So I think United not deterred from their losses.
I mean, I know that they're feeling pretty good overall because a lot of them just went on vacation to Hawaii. We saw a lot of their pictures on Twitter, so I'm sure they are refreshed and ready to go for Phase 2. I know you got a chance to talk to Big Man Tings a little bit earlier on. Tell me what he had to say.
Yeah, he was basically saying how he was the top 2 team. He felt that he was in the top 2 team category. It was him and Renegades battling back and forth and scrimming against each other. But once they ran into that brick wall against Splice, they couldn't really handle it.
Yeah, Splice was definitely pretty hot at the time for sure. I believe we have a quote from Big Man Tings as well on what he had to say regarding E United and their standing kind of going in towards these next phases. As he said, quote, MSI was not the best, prepping for Worlds though, which is the end game, end quote, when what their mentality is right now. And I think that makes some sense. I mean, yes, MSI, not exactly what they wanted, but it's really just there as a kind of benchmark overall through the halfway part. Worlds is the prize,
yes,
for sure.
And they ended the first phase really well at 6-3. They were able to get a lot of good victories in the first phase, and even against their next opponent, they found the victory in that first phase.
So now their first opponent here this phase is SK Gaming, a team that I'd imagine is pretty hungry after missing MSI,
yes,
who wanting to prove that they are a top-end contender. How do you think United matches up here?
Hard to say about how SK has been preparing, but in terms of the creativity from E United between Big Man Tings and also Ice Ice Baby, they have a diverse god pool, 13 different gods played from Big Man, 15 from Ice Ice within 35 games, 37 if you count those 2 forfeit losses, but we don't count those in this. So I think there's bigger chance for E United to find the victory, although with that first loss, it's about the question of their mentality going into it. Are they going to be held back of that first loss, or are they going to be revigorated and motivated to find the victory today?
If you had to give me one player that's going to be the key to E United's success in the second phase, who would it be?
Has to be Big Man overall. He's like kind of the glue that holds the whole team together.
Big Man Tings has definitely been doing big man things in the mid lane, but has to continue in Phase 2 if United is going to be the top 2 team they believe themselves to be. Totally, thank you very much for joining us and talking E United. We're going to go over SK Gaming and their first game back in Phase 2 right on the other side. Welcome back to Esports Weekly. SK Gaming is a team that I think a lot of us expected to see at the Midseason Invitational, but unfortunately did not. Their first game back in action will be this week, and to go over it, we've got Tom Badger, the SK Gaming correspondent, joining us here on Esports Weekly. Tom, it's been a bit since we've talked SK Gaming.
A little bit.
How are they doing? They doing okay?
Honestly, really good, man. SK are really comfortable right now. You know, this is a team that all of them individually, don't forget, sure, they're the same squad from last year, but they've all had storied SPL careers independent. And a lot of them outside of Zapman have kind of struggled to find success. And this is the first time where I think a lot of these players are on a team where you can certainly see what the future looks like, and comfort is really, you know, I work with SSG. It's a much different type of atmosphere.
Yeah, this SK Gaming, I think, has a lot of confidence, despite maybe where they are in the standings. I feel like they understand that they are playing the long game. Just like we were talking about with the United a minute ago, Worlds is the ultimate goal for this team.
Without a doubt. You know, it's funny. I caught up with Sam earlier, I caught up with Neil Ma, and I said, "Yo, what's good, man? What are you thinking about for Phase 2?" And he was like, "Dubs only."
In a mood, huh?
Yeah, and I was like, okay. And he was like, "Do you want a real answer?" I was like, "Yeah." And he went, "Dubs." Oh, okay, I got one for you. And he said, "Look, man, you know, I don't." He said, "Quote, I don't care about world seeding." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Look, man, obviously we want to auto qualify, but if we don't, oh well. I have faith in my team. We're really damn good. We get better every time we go out there. And if you're talking to me, I ain't heard a lie yet. So I look at what he's saying. I'm like, word. This is a very comfortable team that's comfortable with who they are, and like that's really telling. When you can be like, we missed MSI. We know we're going to be better for Worlds. We're going to take it one game at a time. Is the cliche, but it's cliche for a reason, man.
Works out for a lot of teams. We hear Aurora say it all the time
yeah.
for Splice. Zapman is someone that I don't think I really got enough credit for how he played in Phase 1. He soloed just about everyone he played against in the first phase. I mean, how can you not be confident in the way that he's been playing?
It's been fantastic, and if this is my platform to be the Zap fan, I mean,
so to speak,
what's up, man? I again, I mentioned it on patch notes just earlier. Some of the newer fans might not remember when I was just a community member, and I got into Smite because of Zapman, Lazes, Anatoly, and that Dignitas team. And it's been a long time since we've seen that Zapman. A long time. And this season, he's brought it back, man. We're seeing the aggressive Zapman. He's holding W. He's smashing your face. He's soloing you. He's soloing your teammate. He's soloing your teammate's best friend. He might die once, twice, chicken soup with rice. He might dive your Phoenix. He might be in the Titan room before a tier 1 tower goes down, but he's winning the games. And like I said, I mean, that's what I tune in for. I like X's and O's and deep strategy like anybody else.
Sure.
Show me some fireworks, baby. And that's what we're getting.
Zapman definitely won to provide the match, so to speak, for those fireworks. Their match, though, of week 1 is up against E United. Totally was just saying that E United feels like they're a top team in the entire SPL. E United did make it to MSI, but didn't have their best showing there. Where do you think that SK can really make their headroom in this matchup?
I shout out to Max. I think this is all the way up. Max headroom. This is where SK start to solidify themselves and become a strong contender. I don't want to say a strong team because I do think that they've been a strong team and will continue to be so. But I think this is where SK Gaming, that comfort level that I talked about, that Neil kind of showed me, that's where this comes into play. They go up against E United or they go up against, Trifecta or the bottom of the league, and they're going to play their game. They're going to do what they're good at, and they're going to, in my eyes, succeed. I think this is a team that has internalized their game plan. Aggro, we sit up here a lot and backstage a lot and say, what's this team's problem? What's that team's problem? And a lot of the times we come down to they don't know what their game plan is. They don't know what their identity is. What is X team's approach? And if we have to scratch our head, we usually have to look towards the bottom of the standings. SK Gaming has never once made me curious as to what their game plan is, what they identify as, or how they plan to win. And I think that consistency and strategy and mindset is what allows you to win in a long marathon type season like we have.
Well, let's see if they can do it at the beginning of phase 2, and they've got a United up first. Here are caster predictions, and a lot of them leaning the way of SK Gaming. Hindu, the lone man, predicting E United, at least on the screen.
I think he just selected EU.
Yeah, that happens from time to time. Where do you lean on this matchup? Do you think SK is going to pull it out?
Absolutely, SK, and it's fun to come up here and obviously we lean on our teams, but my unbiased opinion is SK.
Okay.
I really and truly think this team has what it takes. Not just everything that I said about the approach to the game, but also this is a damn good team. They got the talent.
Without a doubt. They've also got a second matchup though this week against Obey, the former Trifecta roster. This Obey team did make some changes, getting Mineral instead of Ionic. Do you think that this is SK one of those teams that's susceptible to overlooking their opponents?
No, not at all, and that's a big part of what I think their identity is. Again, I'm going to go back to that exact quote that Neil showed us, where he says, look, I don't care about world seeding. I think that it's the same way where we approach every game the same. We don't care if we're playing Season 3 Epsilon or if we're playing Fun Ball last year or shoutouts to Thirst. They're going to bring the same game every time, and that's why I'm so confident in this SK group.
Yeah, there aren't many duo lanes that like to farm you and embarrass you more than Zap and Neil do, so that's something to watch out for anytime you're going up against that Obey or that SK Gaming squad.
Absolutely.
I should say. Tom, thank you very much for joining us and talking SK Gaming. On the other side, we're going to go over Team Rival after their disappointment at MSI. Stay tuned to Esports Weekly. Welcome back to Esports Weekly, everybody. Normally, John Finch is Team Rivals correspondent, but because John recently watched the beginning of Finding Nemo once more and felt so bad for all those poor clownfish that he went to a clownfish sanctuary to help out, we've got Anatoly subbing in to talk Team Rival. Toly, look, that was a tough MSI for Team Rival.
It really was.
To lose to Armada, despite having all their talent, it's a minor league team that we know didn't get that much practice coming in. How is Rival able to bounce back when it comes to Phase 2?
Honestly, I think they'll still be fine for Phase 2, but let's talk about their MSI performance, because losing to Armada at 0-2, they got bamboozled. Meerkat running it down mid with a double chalice, the blink pressure onto Panda Cat was completely unexpected. I think the problem for Rival in MSI was the fact that they weren't really challenged enough during the regular split. They ended at 8-1 with a plus 19 overall game record. And after their first loss from Dignitas, they didn't lose after that set. They only dropped 4 entire games throughout their next 8 sets, so they needed to be challenged a little bit more. And this team has a lot of creativity. Every single player has at least anywhere between 10 to 15 different gods played throughout their 33 games, and you just got to wonder, like, what really happened to them when they faced off against Armada, because it didn't look like the same Rival in phase number 1 at all.
Yeah, I mean, they had so many things going for them. I think that to highlight that they lost week 1 and then never again during the regular season is a really good point. I think you kind of need to go through some of that adversity a lot of the time as a top team to understand where you are. You hear Dignitas talk about it, where they were glad that they didn't go in undefeated. It didn't end up making the difference for them necessarily, but I do think you learn a lot about yourselves as a team when you take losses like that.
And this is a team that has a lot of synergy together. They're double block scrims every single day. They're able to do stuff outside of the house as well, working out together at the gym. And I think that individually their talent is all across the board. Final K, number 2 KDA overall. Arco tied for number 3 at First Bloods. PBM, number 2 assist in the Guardian position. And Captain Twig, also that facilitator at number 1 jungle assists.
Wow, so you know that this team is working together well as a unit. And I think you got to get back to that, right? If they're going to return to form and be a top team in the SPL once again. Don't forget, even though they lost at the Midseason Invitational, they hold that record from Phase 1. They're coming in as the number 1 seed coming into Phase 2.
It's huge. It's a plus 19 overall game record, and that's going to translate very well in Phase number 2. And I think that this is going to be a good way for them to kind of bounce back, because Armada is a team that was trying to do some desperation tactics, whereas Rival are preparing for every single SPL team. And I think that if Rival faced any other team, they probably actually win MSI. It was unfortunate that they had to face this underdog.
Yeah, Meerkat just a little bit too strong for them, of course, in the mid lane. We did get a chance to talk to PBM after the fact, and this is what he had to say at the bottom of your screen, quote, "We went over things we wanted to change and continue working on for Phase 2, end quote. So they're already looking forward, and I assume that we should do the same then, because they've got a really tough week to open up. They've got they've got Dignitas and the Pittsburgh Knights Thursday, Friday, so it's not like they're getting an easy matchup to come in after this loss. Let's start with Team Dignitas, because that's on Thursday. Dig also did not end up looking quite as strong as they were hoping at MSI, but still is one of those teams that looked like they were ready. They bounced back pretty well against Space Station last week.
That's true. Their first week matchup in phase number 1, Dignitas did win that set, but then the next day, I believe it was, when Rival faced off against PK, that was a better set for them. So I think I have high hopes for Rival in both of their games. They've been challenged before in the regular split, and I don't have any problems with them and their performance then. I think it's all about how they perform at LAN, because thus far in the end of the Season 5, it wasn't too good for PBM and the boys, and it wasn't too good now in MSI.
That is true, though they do have a world championship under their belt for PBM and Panda Cat, of course, so you know that they've got that pedigree. Dignitas is a team, if you look back at that set that Rival lost in Phase 1, it was one that it did go really long. It was a 5-game set, so you know that this isn't an unwinnable set by any means.
It was close, definitely. They almost reverse swept. I believe they lost the first 2, won the next 2, overall lost to game 5. Their picks and bans are very solid. Their coach as well, Slaney, has been certainly helping out there, and I think going up against Dignitas and PK, if they can come out on top in those 2 sets, that the rest of the week should be very smooth for them.
PK is their matchup on Friday, as you alluded to, a team that I think everyone is still looking towards to see how they look, because they looked great towards the end of Phase 1 and then didn't really amount to much at MSI. the Pittsburgh Knights is a matchup that I'm always looking at. Final K versus Deathwalker. That's always a fun lane.
PK should be very interesting. I think that against rivals specifically, this matchup is going to be an epic one to watch.
Yeah, really, really fun in that one. I mean, we're always looking at Deathwalker versus Final K. I think Vote Arkell is another one you got to keep an eye on.
It's going to be aggressive. Arkell has always been challenged against Sadman specifically, but he always battles back, and he gets that first blood.
Yeah, first bloods were really the key, as you mentioned, for him, one of the highest ones for him in the league. Totally, thank you very much for joining us to talk Team Rival. We've got Dignitas. They already played once so far here in Phase 2, but they got a tough one up against Rival. Stay with us here on Esports Weekly. In week 1, phase 1, or maybe it was week 2, one of the early weeks in phase 1, Dignitas was able to take down Team Rival. We'll see if they can do the same here as we get started in phase 2. We've got Graham Hadfield, the correspondent here for Team Dignitas, joining us. Graham, as I mentioned, they took down Rival early on phase 1.
They did.
But it wasn't easy.
No, it was a good set between the two, if you think about it. It could have realistically gone either way with how that set went. Spoke to Ataraxia, first of all, I'll start off with that. He's the one that I got in touch with this week, because I try and switch it up with who I speak to for the most part.
Sure.
Not go to the same face, get a bit of a different idea. He was really looking at like what happened with Rival in that first set of last time round, and he was like, listen, it was a close set between the two. But he feels that Rival's trajectory through phase 1 was just the same as Dignitas, if you think about it. Dignitas got really hot early on, and they got really comfortable, but then they got a little bit complacent and struggled. And he said, well, he felt Rival did the same thing. The only difference is it really showed for them against the Armada set at MSI. So both teams have had a very similar tale in that first phase.
That is true, but at the same time, Dignitas have had to show at least a little bit of something so far after the midseason patch. They took down Space Station.
But it's Space Station, and we kind of all expected that. Even, the analysts and stuff around. Most of the fans at home had a feeling with how phase 1 went going into phase 2, and with how Dig, did at MSI as well. It was bound to happen. That first set was more a warm-up than anything else.
That's
a continuation.
True. They're coming in warm. That's a good point. But Rival's going to be pretty hungry. I was just talking about some of the matchups I expect to really look forward to in the Rival set versus Knights. But in this one, supports is what immediately jumps off the page to me. PBM versus Trixtank is one that's always a blast to watch.
And to be fair, every single one of these roles, with Trixtank as well, like every single role that Dignitas has and every on Rivals team as well, they're such a go back and forth matchup where either side could do well. Trixtank, though, I think has seen a lot more freedom this year for himself as well. We've spoken about it in phase 1, and I think that's just going to continue on into phase 2 a little bit more. The main point that Ataraxia mentioned was really when they talk about their complacency. Biggie had spoken to me about, they got a little bit too experimental. They had a bit too much fun towards the end of phase 1, and it kind of came back to haunt them. So I think you'll see quite a serious focus in this Rival set today, this week, because how well they're both going to play out.
Yeah, Rival is one of those teams that you have to be ready and prepared for, it feels like, because they're going to throw a lot of different things at you. And Dignitas' flexibility is something, you mentioned it for Trixtank, I think has been a really big boon for them this year. And right after midseason patch is the great time to be experimental, right?
Yeah, definitely. And then if you think about the actual players on this team as well, you've got Kiva in the jungle that's willing to play the Guardians. He can go the Cherio route, so to speak, is how I would call that, even though Cherio may not have been the very first person in there. But then you've also got, Trix that's able to play the Warriors. He doesn't mind playing mages if need be. It's not often we see mages in the duo lane, or the support role, I should say. It's not really in the duo lane anymore either. Or is it? We'll find out this year.
I guess we will. I do think that's a good point to bring up, though, is this meta. It seems like Dig and Rival aren't really the two teams I would expect to excel in this. Not that Arkell and Ataraxia aren't great players, but they are really traditional most of the time. Do you feel like Ataraxia is the one who can pull out the Zhong Kui or whatever?
It's funny because you say that, like, they're not traditional. I think Ataraxia is one of those hunters that have been around the scene. He played solo for a very little while. Once upon a time, we played even some cheeky Sylvanas in that. Didn't work out great. Listen, but it shows their willingness to experiment and play around with different gods.
Listen, Sylvanas ult has higher scaling than Kraken does. That's all. That was Ataraxia's whole argument. He's not wrong.
And all I'm saying on that, I'm not saying it's a good pick at all. All I was saying is it shows his ability and his willingness to experiment a little bit more. And I think it's something that Dignitas can definitely have fun with this split. But they've got to be careful too. And I think they see that themselves, where they started to move away quite a bit last split, away from where they had their bread and butter wins.
I'm really excited to see these predictions from all the casters on the team, because I think this is one of those sets that really could end up going either way. Feels like everyone's leaning a little bit more Dignitas, though, Graham.
I was dig on this one. I have to be, because I'm, their rep as well. My EU United comment earlier on, by the way, on that one, it was a United. I do think a United will be SK, just so you know. I know you mentioned it, of like, maybe you got it wrong. I'm like, nope.
Not me, that was Tom.
Nope, that's all the other casters that got that one wrong. This one, though, from Atiraxi's point of view, I think him and the team have looked at what's been going on in the scene and looked at what's been going on in the off-season and said, listen, a lot of what they did, they're happy with the performance to an extent, but they feel they tapered off, and it's really focused on trying to get back to their strength and stick with it for the rest of the split here.
I do think the Dignitas is one of those teams that can look at what another successful team like, say, the Renegades have done as of late and apply it with putting their own style on it. They're not going to try and copycat you. They're going to look at what you did and then apply it to their own sort of play style. And I think that's the right way to do it.
I think one thing that Dignitas really want, and this is me just spitballing what I feel about them more than anything else, I really feel that Dignitas needs to take a little bit closer look towards Horrywind here and use a little bit of his NA knowledge, his little bit of NA background to throw a bit of a mix into this roster, just a hair more. There's a lot of a difference between the European players, the North American players, and we're seeing that collapse this year. And I feel like mainly European players have done very well, but the ones that have had that little bit of spice of NA coming into it has really helped out to grow them forward.
And Hurry, one of the more comfortable mid laners, are playing Hunters a lot, and that's kind of the meta right now.
Sure.
Could be the case for them.
Could
Graham,
be.
thanks very
No
much
problem.
for joining us to talk about Team Dignitas. We're going to go to a quick break here, of course, but we got going to the Pittsburgh Knights right after this, see how they're feeling going to Phase 2. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Esports Weekly, everybody. The Pittsburgh Knights are the team we're going to be talking about next. And normally this is John Finch's correspondent team, but as I mentioned, he's a little bit busy today. You see, he saw the episode, or the beginning of Up again, right after watching Finding Nemo, and upon realizing that Up is indeed sadder than Finding Nemo, has gone into hiding to really introspect and look a little bit closer on his inside and what made him think it wasn't the case in the first place. Glad for John to really understand what is happening in reality these days, though. In reality, we've got Taco subbing in for him here to talk about the Pittsburgh Knights. First of all, we're very happy for Finch, are we not?
Definitely. I mean, this is something that we both tried to talk him through beforehand. He
Many
didn't
times.
really listen, and then, when he experienced it for himself, we were like, we understand, man. We understand where you're coming from.
It's about time. I mean, Finch has been an owner of bad opinions before, but this was unlike anything we had seen. Luckily, he's back on the right page, just like the Pittsburgh Knights want to do as we start off with them for Phase 2. What happened with this team, Taco? Because they were looking so good coming in MSI, and then they got a bad draw. They got Renegades round 1, but they got trounced there.
It was definitely a little bit of a surprise for, I think, all parties involved. Pittsburgh Knights were probably expecting to come out a lot better than what they actually did against the Renegades. It definitely, I mean, the level of standard that this team tends to hold themselves to, just individually speaking, it caught everybody by surprise, including the team. But I think that Pittsburgh Knights were also very realistic with themselves, and they were very willing to admit the fact that this was just Renegades coming through and having a much stronger performance.
Renegades were certainly the freight train, so to speak, and PK kind of just stepped into the tracks more or less. Phase 2, this is a new life kind of for PK. I think that this is one of their spots where this is a team that could make some noise.
One issue that Pittsburgh Knights definitely had at MSI, at least, is that they seemed a little bit stuck in what they wanted to strategize around. They seemed very adamant in trying to look for that Hevel jungle prioritization for adapting, and it just didn't really seem as though that was the intention from Renegades. I mean, Renegades and Splice, I think, both kind of split the meta wide open over at MSI. And for Pittsburgh Knights now, I think the focus is solely going to be on execution, because even with all things considered and Renegades having come through with a better performance, I still personally believe that Pittsburgh Knights is a top-tier team. They are certainly capable of becoming number one in the standings. It really just comes down to them maybe just needing to revamp some of their original game plans surrounding that mid-jungle aspect and look more towards the duo.
Now, if there's one player who's going to kind of be one of the faces of this transition, if they're going to be one of those top-end teams, right now everyone's talking about Hunter players because they're not really playing Hunters these days. Vote stepping up and being one of these carries, I think, is going to be key for them.
Dual lane is just getting so much farm right now, and it's kind of obvious that Hunters have been loving this transition for multiple reasons, but Vote is someone that I think can really be a step-up factor here for the Pittsburgh Knights. He's definitely a competent player in his own right, has tons of experience and knowledge of that role, but it's more so about ensuring that he just gets those comfortable matchups to where he can actually try to take advantage of all the farm that's being given to him in duo right now.
And it may not seem like he's one of those guys who's going to pull out the weird stuff, but I seem to recall him playing some Camazotz ADC back in the day when Camazotz was kind of the flavor of the month. I feel like Vote can kind of embrace that weird, who knows what anyone's going to play their role.
Vote he's a flexible guy. I mean, I think that when you have a player that's capable of extending his god pool not only into the mages and assassins, but traditional hunters as well, it certainly makes things a lot more open-ended as far as what Pittsburgh Knights is capable of assigning in other roles. I think that with Vote, if he is able to essentially rise up for the team here, then that could give Zeros or even Deathwalker a little bit more of an opportunity to try and getting some more involvement as well towards that duo lane, whether it's from early game rotations or just from general team fighting, trying to help better assist the Hunter.
Now, this is going to be a tough test at the very beginning of Phase 2, though, with Team Rival. How do you think the Knights match up against one of the top-tier teams in the league?
I actually think that Rival should be a little bit worried here. I'm kind of scared for anybody, especially the first team that has to play against Pittsburgh Knights, because this is a team where that performance at MSI, I guarantee you they're not happy about it in the slightest, and they are going to come into Phase 2 with a vengeance. That's just the way that it's always been with members like Adapting, Deathwalker. These guys are hungry to prove that they made this powerhouse team for a reason.
Plus, Adapting and the boys just traveled. They went to Pittsburgh, going to see the Knights facilities and all that kind of stuff, had a gaming convention there, Replay FX. Hopefully they absorbed some Permani's power and all that kind of stuff and are ready to go. But Lord help the Rival if Adapting had a bad TSA experience or there was some turbulence on that flight. Angry Kenneth is one you do not want to mess with.
And I don't want to say that he's angry by any means after MSI, because it happens, and you can't always be number one at every single event that you are brought to, but at the same time, I am definitely expecting this Pittsburgh Knights team to really just come out aggressively.
Now let's see what everyone else has to say about this setup, though, because this is going to be one of those great sets, and we're split down the middle. Hindu and Finch siding with Team Rival. Tom and Toli feeling like PK might be the ones to take it. You're a tiebreaker, Taco. Where are you leaning?
It's a tough call, but I think I gotta hand it to Rival. I've really been a big fan of what FinoK has been able to accomplish so far, and well, I guess this will be an excellent challenge to see where Deathwalker kind of stands up currently.
That's true. FinoK, one of the premier solo laners, and has really taken one of those premier slots, I would say. Deathwalker's had it for a long time, but you don't just get to hold it forever, and FinoK definitely coming for that king slot in the solo lane. Taco, thank you very much for joining us. Talk PK. As I mentioned, they are coming back from Pittsburgh, so hopefully they are now all certified Sheets freaks and they're ready to go for Phase 2. I know that's what PK, the org, wants from their players, of course. We're almost towards the end of Esports Weekly now. We're going to go over Obey Alliance, formerly Trifecta, and see how they're feeling as they kick off Phase 2. Welcome back, everybody. This time it's a new-ish roster for Obey Alliance and a new org title, still owned by Shook and all the boys, but now Obey Alliance coming back. A storied organization back into the Smite scene. Always excited to talk about that, and to do it, we've got Hindu Man joining us once again. All right, but we got to start somewhere else.
Yeah, Ataraxia, pretty prime, excited.
No. This is like Weekend and Mazwal, still there. Wowie. Yeah. No,
Oh.
flip to that page.
Oh, there
Yeah.
we go. Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. I've got it here.
Weekend had a tweet the other night.
Oh, we're going to start with that?
We have to. We
Oh.
have to, right? I mean, this is the current esports happenings.
Okay, sure. We can have a tweet.
Weekend had a tweet.
You're leading this. I'm just going to follow. What are we doing?
Weekend had a tweet.
Because you're doing this in dangerous territory.
I sure am. Yeah, I know I am. I'm treading into dangerous waters, of course.
That's
here.
what I was like. Well, you better
Look, Weekend said that there are two types of teammates that once they leave the team, they're going to react in certain ways.
Yeah.
Referenced Incon and in the videos that he likes to make. He said that Ionic may have left Obey a present in the toilet there. There's no way this is true.
I'm going to say
right?
what I
There's-
said to you about this, too. I think that's been there since Lasbra left. And I
Lasbra
just
was
don't
the
think
culprit.
anyone saw it, but that was the situation.
Okay, well, there you go. That's the theory.
And the
not
people that know the
confirmed.
Lasbra stories, yeah, there you go.
Okay,
Yeah. See,
that's where
kept
we
it
went.
PG.
Real PG, of
Warned
course.
you.
Yep. Listen, I led the horse to water. You jumped in and drowned. That's all.
I was
I'm saying.
thirsty. What can I say, you know?
Look, new org now, still the same
Yep.
owner, of course, but
New rookie.
new
is the
rookie and
biggest thing for
mineral.
me,
Yeah, where do you want to start? Do you think that this facelift will be a big difference maker?
So I'm going to basically talk about Mineral first of all, because that's the major talking point. They bring in Mineral, Ionic off this team. He moves to Luminosity. And then when you think of the name Mineral, my immediate thought was about him and Wowie, his connection with Wowie on this roster. They've played together previously in the minor leagues before. So immediately I reached out to Wowie to get some information on what he feels, why did they pick him up? And it really was like,
Sure.
we needed some chemistry. We needed someone that could make decisions in the game. I also knew him. I played with him before. I knew the comfort level that he's going to bring, and it's working out really well from their point of view. Now, Mineral, obviously, he's been around the scene for quite a while, playing through the minor leagues and such, but this is his very first call-up to the SPL, and a very important time, too, realistically, with how this trifecta / now Obey roster went through that very first phase. It was a real strugglesome time for them, where they couldn't find synergy. Roster changes happen. We mentioned Lasbro in, Moswell now in for that team now, and then Ionic now moving away for this Mineral pickup. It's pretty much a different roster than the one that started out phase 1.
Yeah, it's a very different look for them, and I think that's the big thing to remember. It's that, they only got a new support, and this team clearly had problems besides that,
Sure.
and maybe it's not enough of a change, but I don't think that Moswell really had time to settle with this roster in phase 1. I think
No.
that this is basically a completely new roster anyways.
Yeah, and that's when we're looking at what I spoke to Worry about with how practice was going, he was like, listen, since having Mineral added to this team, it feels like they've been really good because they've been able to play a little bit more focus on the early game. Moswell, Weekend, and Mineral seem to be getting along very well in the early game, and they're starting to find their own identity now. They're starting to decide what's good for them and how they can play. Worry also feels that his god pool's been able to be expanded a little bit because he felt like he was kind of limited with the selections that they were having in certain roles. And now Mineral, with his wide god pool, as he put it, is available. It's giving them a little bit more depth, a little bit more options for this team to try and make success.
Well, they've got to do that early game well. You mentioned that they're feeling pretty confident there, but you have to be up against a team like SK Gaming that's going to try to exploit you at that part of the game. Do you think that this newfound strength might be enough to set them up against SK?
In fairness to me, I think it's a 50-50 coin toss. I think SK, and the best thing is, talking to Worry, he felt like last time they played, they lost 3-0 to SK Gaming, but he didn't feel like their team had much prep time for that real set. This time around, though, they've made adjustments and are more motivated than any other split previously. Plus, they do feel as well that with the changes they've made, as long as they can get through the early game, this was the direct quote, he said, I don't want to get zapulated and adapt quickly against their early game playstyle. That's what the game plan is for Obey in this set.
I'm glad that Wowie seems ready because Zap has been on a nightmare train,
I don't
basically.
think it's going to stop if he continues. If he's playing the way he was playing so far phase 1, I think Zap is the one to really look to cause problems for so many different carries in the league.
It's been a scorched earth policy for SK in the duo lane. Everyone left in the dust behind them. And it looks like the casters feel like they're going to leave Obey in the dust this week.
I get it. I completely understand that too. If you think about the fact that we said this team struggled in phase 1, right?
Yep.
But then we've got roster changes, and we always know whenever a roster change comes through, it doesn't immediately fix everything. It takes a little bit of a while. It takes some time working as a team, gelling, working out where your strengths and weaknesses are.
Obey Alliance trying to bring everyone back and make them obey once again. Graham, thank you very much for joining us to talk about the old/new roster of Trifecta/Obey Alliance. We still got to go over what's going on in the SCL and SML. We had a full week of games there, so stay tuned here on Esports Weekly. Welcome back to Esports Weekly, everybody. It was a full week of the SCL and SML as we get back into the swing of things here in Phase 2. And if you haven't been watching the SCL or SML, this is a great time to get into it because this is the time where everyone's still kind of experimenting with mid-season patch and what gods are good, what items are good. It's not like all this innovation only happens in the SPL. We've seen plenty of strats taken from the lower-end teams. You may have heard Renegades in their interviews talking about their practice up against Simplicity. That was a big deal for them, so make sure you're tuning in. Here's what you may have missed. We're going to start with the PS4 EU standings. VGS Gods sitting up on top. It was Out Cold Gaming who came to land, remember, out of this region. They start off a little bit cold, 1-1. Get it? EU Xbox, on the other hand, Rival continues to look great, but Dabo's Disciples with some roster changes, and Rival again swap mid laners. Fly went from Rival to Dabo's, now from Dabo's back to Rival. Dobson goes back to his Disciples, but that hasn't really made them hay too much quite yet, but this is their first week where they had Dobson back in the mid lane with them. Looking forward to that rematch. The former teammates against former teammates and current teammates, I think, is how that works. On the North American side of things, we expect basically Nemesis to continue to dominate the PS4 side, and they continue to oblige us. This team looks like they have no contest in this league. We'll see if anyone can step up and take down their Nemesis. And then on the Xbox side of things, Hype Unit, they had Crimson come in his first debut week in the ADC role and looked very good. Inbound died to Fire Giant. That was the most noteworthy part for me. It was my favorite part of the entire week of the SCL, was watching Inbound die to the Fire Giant. It was very fun. Go watch the VOD, trust me. Onto the onto the schedule for this week of the SCL. We're going to see Dabo Disciples up against Team Jellyfish. See how Dobson continues to integrate there. VGS Gods, we'll see if they can hold on to their top spot in PS4 Europe. And then Fatal Ambition up against Blanche Fan Club. Two teams that are trying to catch up to Hype Unit. BFC, by the way, the old school Heat Uprise team, now, of course, without Crimson as he is on Hype Unit, but that was a top-tier contender in Xbox NA not that long ago, so make sure you tune in for that one as we close out on Monday. Now it's time to move over to the SML, and we saw a couple games in Europe this week. Simplicity continues to look way better than they have any right to. This team is SPL level by my estimation. Team Queso off to a hot start as well, though, sitting at 2-0-3. Both Exordium and Horizon Union, we got our first chances to see those two new additions to the minor league. They struggled. Still getting acclimated, to the European minor league. As for North America, how about Sanguine? This team is so much fun to watch. If you haven't watched this team in a while, you saw them in MSI, hey, they're pretty good. Trust me, they are better than you think. They win another one. If you missed top 5 plays earlier, their jungler Panatom got 2 quadras and 1 triple in the same game. Not in a set, the same game. Absolutely nuts. Armada did win their offline game, evening their record at 1-1. That was the team that came out of that region, of course, to the MSI and played very, very well, but Sanguine's on top right now. Wouldn't be surprised if it stayed that way for just a little bit. Here's this week's schedule coming up. Sanguine's games will be offline, but you can see Armada versus Team Cryptic and Space Station Gold versus Team Exilium a little bit later on Tuesday. And then to start us off that day, we've got Flashpoint Simplicity, which is going to be a great game, and Out Cold Horizon Union. Horizon Union looking to bounce back after a tough week 2. That does it for the SML. Again, that's on Tuesdays, 11 a.m., mixer.com/SmiteGames, same spot every time. Let's take a look at the SPL standings because it's not like we're starting at 0-0 again, even though we're in the second week of Phase 2. All those records carry over. Not so good for the likes of Space Station Gaming, Obey Alliance, and LG, but maybe they can make some hay here in the second phase. Rival is your top seed going into week 2, but they've got a matchup up against Team Dignitas and PK. 1, 2, and 3. All playing against each other to kick us off here this week. We're starting off with E United up against SK Gaming. Then Rival begins their doubleheader. They end Thursday with Dignitas, open Friday with PK, and then I get our first look at the new look Obey Alliance up against SK Gaming on Friday. Rival this week, this is the test, right? I mean, they had a tough week at MSI. I mean, we get it. Armada kind of cheesed you. They're saying all the right things, and they've done everything they can. Nothing they can do right now to prove that they're ready to go for Phase 2. This is how we know this team is going to be good and healthy moving forward. Look, if they go 0-2, is it the end of the world? No. PBM and boys are still going to be just fine. But if you're a Rival fan, do you really want to lose to Armada and then Dignitas and then PK? I don't think so. Big week for Team Rival. Prove they are still on top of the SPL, so make sure you tune in 11 a.m. starting on Thursday and Friday as well. Mixer.com/SmiteGame is a place to go. If you want to get in touch with us here at Esports Weekly, at SmitePro on Twitter, or at Aggro if you want to get directly to me. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you next week here on Esports Weekly.